Get.
And Colleen, if you want to jump in, I can keep admitting folks and making sure people look for hands and making sure people are aware of the recording.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more minute. Okay, thing 102, I think we'll get started. Thank you everybody for joining our team meeting again today. We have a lot to get through, and hopefully we'll get even to triplexes and fourplexes if we're lucky. But our meeting today, we're going to do roll call first and then go through our meeting protocols and then talk about lot coverage first, then floor area ratio, discuss ADUs or accessory dwelling units, and then dive into the Excel chart that we left off on at the last meeting. I do want to do a quick roll call, so I have it on the recording. So I'll start with Jenna. If you are there, just say you're here. Dave Johnson, I saw you.
Here, yes.
Lisa. Is Lisa Michelle available or here?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, how about Scott Winters?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Scott. Kathy, I saw her when we talked. Sam Frigus. And then Audrey Allen, we spoke already. And then Jesse is not able to make it today. How about Jeff Harris? Nope. How about Karna?
Here.
Hi, Karna. Matt Gillette. I don't think he was able to make it. And Moe is not able to make it either. Alexis. A small group today. How about Ryan Jennings? And Bill Bernardi.
Here.
Hi, Bill. Sarah Santa.
Here. Hi, Pauline.
Hi, how are you? Mike Walker.
Here.
Great, and I saw Ethan joined us as well. Thank you, Ethan.
Hello.
Okay, so
Colleen, sorry to interrupt. It looks like Lisa just jumped on as well.
oh great.
Yeah.
Lisa and who?
Sorry, Lisa Mushel.
Oh, perfect. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thank you.
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. I'm trying to. Okay. All right, so just quick meeting protocols, same as last time. Unfortunately, we have Lynn here to help us with all this again today. I would encourage that everybody participates today in all the discussions that we have regarding each item. Please be respectful about other people's opinions and comments. And if there's a majority of support for any of the items that we talk to for a particular change, then we'll just move on if it's obvious. If there is, not consensus, then we'll do what we did last time with some voting and ask you to raise your hands so that we can see if there's a majority. Again, this is just, the beginning of drafting code amendments. Things could change, but we just need to get votes done so that we could at least start drafting proposed text amendments. And then if you can, just keep yourself on mute so that the background noise doesn't come through as as a person is speaking. And then raise your hand if you do want to discuss something or provide a comment. And then we'll try and keep track of those, as well as I will try my best too, so that everyone with a hand raised will be able to participate in the discussion. All right, next slide. All right, so we're going to jump right into lot coverage. And bear with me as we go through this, it's a lot of information. So first with lot coverage, I want to just remind the group what the revised statute or minimum compliance standards are and what the model code requirement is. And there's always that alternative siting and design standard if we choose to do that. But with the revised or minimum standards for lot, yep.
Can you make that bigger? We can't, it's very small.
That, let me switch screens and see if I can get it. Okay, let me stop sharing and see if I can. Okay, bear with me. Okay, so there's that. Put that over there. Okay. Well, it's still on that screen.
Pauline, I notice a lot of people still aren't muted, and I'm getting a lot of background noise. I just want to mention that if people could please mute.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So I'm not sure I can get it any. Oh, let me try one more thing. Hold on, because this is important for you to be able to see it. I'm gonna.
If you leave it like that, we can see it.
Okay, so I switched screens. Now, if I do it without this, oh darn, okay, so I see what you're saying. So with my shared screens, I can't share. Okay. Oh, but then I can. Okay, well, you'll probably see my notes. So this you can see a little bit better.
Yes.
Yeah, looks
See
good.
that better.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, we'll just stick with this. Okay, so back to lot coverage. So the minimum compliance standards, which is in the OARs, is a city is not required to apply lot coverage. And what I'm going to do is just go through what our options are, what the city requires today, some examples of what lot coverages look like on some developments here in Bend. And then in the end, we'll go through our the options and have a discussion. So with this one, minimum compliance, the city is not required to apply lot coverage to duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes. If a city wants to, they can. It just can't be more restrictive than what we apply to a single family detached dwelling unit. And then the model code simply says you're not allowed to apply lot coverage. So lot coverage in the Bend Development Code basically talks about the amount of building that covers the land. There isn't some exceptions or reductions for porches or patios or decks up to 5%. And the idea there is to hopefully provide an incentive. So if you want to have a larger porch, you can, or a larger deck, and it doesn't take away from your livable space. In Bend, for lot coverage, we break it down based on the zoning districts today. So in our low density residential zoning district, lot coverage is 35%. In our standard density residential and medium density residential for single story dwelling units, or let's start with just standard density residential. For single story dwelling units and single story accessory structures, you can go up to 50%. If you go above a single story for all the uses, then you're at 45% lot coverage. In the medium density residential zone, it's similar. For single family detached dwelling units and just single family detached, it's 50% for single stories and 45% if you have a 2-story single family detached dwelling unit. If you choose to develop a townhome or a duplex, triplex, or a fourplex, in the medium density residential, you can go up to 60% lot coverage. And that was done in a recent code amendment in the past, like probably 2 years. And then the high density residential, because we're trying to get as many units as possible, there is no lot coverage requirements. So now I'm going to go through some examples in Bend, and then in the end, we'll talk about our options. So here's a recently submitted triplex that is proposed on Northwest Florida Street. It's on a 4,560 square foot lot, and it's only at 41% lot coverage. This is zoned high density residential, but we know the lot coverage is 41%. The next one, this is might look familiar to some, a recently constructed fourplex and fiveplex that is on Newport Avenue. The fiveplex, I believe, if you can see my cursor here, is in the front, and that lot is 6,150 square feet. And if you've driven by it, this will give you a sense of what a lot coverage would feel like, because it's only at 32.8%. So it's definitely in compliance with the Bend Development Code. This unit in the back is a triplex, and it shares the lot with a single family dwelling unit. And it's on a lot that's 6,120 square feet, and it's at 36% lot coverage. So, you know, these examples do show that it is possible to comply with our lot coverage and still get a number of dwelling units. This is a single story dwelling unit in the front, and I believe that is a duplex in the back, which creates a triplex. Also on Newport, and it is 6,840 square foot lot size, and its lot coverage is only 27%. Two more examples. So this is a house with an ADU, and it's at 29%. And one more. This looks it's a house with an ADU, but also looks like a duplex. It's all single story, and it's at 41%. So these are demonstrating that I think that with our lot coverage requirements that we have today, they seem to be doable. There might be some room for improvement, but I still support lot coverage. This is an example that, thank you, Matt. I just saw that you joined us, that he created for me, because I was curious if you wanted to, which I wouldn't recommend, but if we did away with lot coverage, what does that look like? If you just relied on setbacks. And so Matt drew this up for us, and it shows basically 5-foot side and rear yard setbacks, 10-foot front setback for the livable space, and it assumes a garage. So then it would put a 20-foot setback. So you can see the indents here would be where the garages would be. So that's 20-foot setback. And if you simply just relied on setbacks and not on lot coverage, then you would significantly increase the lot coverage requirements. So on a 4,000 square foot lot, you would go up to over 58%. On a 5,000 square foot lot, you would be up to 64%. And on a 7,000 square foot lot, you'd be up to 70% lot coverage. And these square footages on the bottom are basically the amount of land that could be covered based on those percentages. So the question for the group then, and sorry if I'm going too fast, but we'll have a discussion on it now, is do we keep our current lot coverage requirements that we have today, which again is 35% for low density residential, 50% for standard density residential for single stories, 45% for all other, or 2 stories or 3 stories in the standard density residential. And then once you get to medium, if you're doing the townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, multifamily, you can already go up to 60%. And then the high density, remember, there is no lot coverage requirements. The other option is to keep lot coverages in the Bend Development Code, but maybe we see a need to increase 1 or 2 of them based on the discussions that we have. Or the other option would be to eliminate the lot coverages. So I would like to open it up now. I see some hands raised, and Lynn, you can help me with this, but it looks like Kathy.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I wasn't clear on how, like, a covered front porch or an uncovered deck or parking are included or not included in the lot coverage.
Okay, good question, Kathy. So here's the definition. Again, it should be on your screen. So basically, we look at all the lot that is covered by a building, and we define that by building footprint. So we don't include eaves. So you're not penalized if you want to have an eave. So we look at, the garage that's covering it and the livable space that's covering it. And at some point, we do take the calculations for anything that's 18 inches or higher above finished grade. So a covered porch, for example, you add all that up, and then you can add the porches, patios, decks, balconies, stoops, anything that's over 18 inches, and take off 5%.
I see. Well, I guess if there was going to be any change, maybe that is one area we could consider to try and encourage balconies and, other areas that add architectural interest to the buildings. That
So
would
maybe
be my.
increase that 5%.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just putting it out there for discussion that if that is something that we think adds attractiveness and what we want to see, we don't want to necessarily penalize it. So maybe it's something that could be added, but I don't have a definitive answer or way I'm leaning, but it just seems like that might be something that we would consider amending slightly. I'm going to mute myself.
Good suggestion. Are there others that want to provide input? Looks like Audrey.
Yeah, so I may have missed this first spot, but I had a project where we were trying to work with the lot coverage, and the way I was trying to do it and accommodate the parking was raising the ADU up and having an open carport below with some closed storage. Would that carport being capped by another structure, would it be included in the lot coverage? But even though it's open on most sides, and then open stairwells and that kind of thing?
Yes, if it is over 18 inches in height, it would be counted because that carport is still a covered structure, so it would count towards lot coverage.
I would love to see something where that didn't count as fully to lot coverage, because it does create a little more openness to the lot. So the massing, I don't believe, is as heavy as a solid structure. So it helps to keep it a little bit open, but it helps to resolve the issue of fitting parking and still having an extra small structure on there, for whatever that's worth.
Helpful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? Looks like Scott.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
I guess I was gonna, I'm getting a lot of echo in here. I guess the comment I would have to make is maybe kind of step back here. Why do we have a lot coverage? Like, what does it mean? A lot of these are the lot coverages where the lot would be open would be maybe in the backyard. So it wouldn't really necessarily affect the presence of a building or a house on a street. And then there's also a little bit of, when you showed the footprints of the lot coverage and kind of the blocky nature of it, my initial reaction is, oh God, I wouldn't want to live there because I like having a little bit of a backyard. And then I kind of think, am I just projecting my own interests in how other people should be able to build their properties? So I guess maybe if there's a discussion of what exactly does the lot coverage, what's the benefit of it, and why do we have it? And I think that's, before we maybe talk about increasing this or including that or whatever, maybe we can just kind of talk about, just step back and just ask the question, like, why?
Well, from my experience, I think lot coverage just helps control the scale of the building on the lot so that it doesn't consume the entire piece of property. And in Bend, we do only have 5-foot rear yard setbacks. In other communities, I've seen, in a lot of communities actually, where they have a 10-foot rear yard setback. So you're already guaranteed that there's going to be more open space on the lot and less massing. But in Bend, it's a little bit different, being that we already have such reduced setbacks. So I think the intent of lot coverage is to provide some way of controlling the mass of this, how much massing or how much structure is going to be on that lot. Because some developers probably would use every inch if they could.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess my comment was more of how you would see it from the street, because I mean I think that's a lot of when people are talking about massing and how the aesthetics of an area, a lot of it is not necessarily looking into someone's backyard, but it's from the from the public street and from the neighborhood and looking across the street at your neighbors. And a lot of the houses, at least a lot of the houses in my neighborhood, they're built right up to the setbacks on the sides and the front. And so whether or not that house goes all the way back to the rear setback or has a backyard, like I can't tell. It wouldn't change the look of or the feel of the neighborhood. And I'm not advocating. I'm just kind of posing the question out there.
No, that's a good question too. And I don't have any examples to show what a neighborhood would look like if all the lots are built to the maximum, because we've always had, or for many years, unless Colin knows different, a lot coverage requirement. So the pictures that we, and I know I didn't provide a whole bunch of pictures, but these all comply with lot coverage. And if there wasn't lot coverage, it might be developed slightly differently or developed more intensely too. And then there are some other architects or people on this that might be able to provide some more information regarding the purpose of lot coverage. Be interested in hearing from them.
It looks like we have Karna, Audrey, and Kathy next, if assuming Scott was done.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So is it Karna?
Karna?
Yeah, I'm not an architect, so I can't speak to the lot coverage. Is there a potential, and maybe I just don't know master plans very well, is it possible to allow full lot coverage or no lot coverage in a master plan community and then infill, do the suggestions Audrey and Kathy had suggested?
Yes, so in a master plan, when a developer comes in and proposes a master plan, they can propose deviations to all the development standards. So if they propose to not have lot coverages, they can. They're still going to have to provide drainage on site in a lot of cases, and that would probably be it.
Well, I was just wondering if we didn't have to have a deviation in a master plan, because I know in some master plans, especially in the valley, they just set aside a water detention pond and it all drains there. All the water drains there. And if we could just allow outright in a master plan, no lot coverages. I understand with infill, you're trying to deal with compatibility to existing neighborhoods. And I like the balconies and the ideas that Kathy Austin and Audrey brought up.
So maybe we're talking about two different types of master plans. So in the city of Bend, a master plan community is Discovery West, for example, or Petrosa that just went through the process where they want to deviate from not just lot coverage, but a number of development standards. And so there's that process called master planning where they can propose what basically any deviation they want and go through that for properties that are over 3 acres and required for properties over 20 acres. That's what we call master planning.
Right.
So it would be those larger.
And that's what I'm talking about. I just, the planning commissioner council can always say no. That was my thought, is to prevent being discretionary, I guess. That was my thought. That was it.
Looks like we have Audrey, then Kathy, then Matt.
All right, just to kind of recap what I thought we could achieve with a variation for covered carports and open stairwells is what it achieved, and what helps with the feel of the massing is that the purpose was to maintain more open yard space in between the buildings or on the side of the buildings, because parking takes up a lot of space and there's nothing else you can do with it. So to be able to stack something over it while not counting that parking area, if it is a certain percentage open, enables you to keep more open space on the lot. It's not going to zero requirement for it. It's just having an allowance for those, for if you're using over parking spaces and or an access requirement that's not enclosed below. So it did really help to keep the lot feel more open and to maintain some more landscaped area.
So Audrey, you're talking about like almost tuck under parking. So if
correct.
Okay, that's a good clarification.
Because parking is such a, property sucker and not nice to look at. And so I think it benefits to be able to tuck it under other structure and not count it towards that coverage.
Okay. I'm making notes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then Kathy?
So I have a question for some clarification. The difference between floor area ratio and lot coverage. In my mind, lot coverage is what is physically covering the ground, whereas floor area ratio would count the livable area if there's a second floor, for instance. And so while I could be supportive of lot coverage requirements, maybe it's the floor area ratio that disappears, considering we've got all these other requirements. And the other question that I have is, I've designed projects where the lot was considered to be from the middle of the street back, as opposed to, say, behind the sidewalk. And so I'm just wondering on the definition of lot when we're doing this, are we all clear? Has everybody got the same definition of what the lot size is? It's been used as ways of getting more coverage by counting the lot in the middle of the street. So
that's a good clarification, Kathy. So typically a lot is back a sidewalk, but not always. Some subdivisions have been proposed where there is an alley and it's on an access easement in the back, and the lot actually goes to the middle of the alley. And in those cases, we do look at lot coverage as the lot. So if it goes into the middle of the alley, you still get to count that towards your lot and your lot coverage. So it just depends, what subdivision you're in, and if your lot is back a sidewalk or if it goes to perhaps the middle of the alley. And I guess I have seen it where it does go to the middle of the street in some of these private developments. We don't really encourage that too much, but it does happen.
Yeah, well, so that's a little unclear as far as how we go forward. Could you just clarify the difference between floor area ratio and lot coverage? Because I know we're going to talk about floor area ratio, but I noticed on the slide that you have here, we're talking about lot coverage, but then it says FAR, 0.41 square feet. So I just want to make sure that I am understanding clearly that they're two different things, or are you considering them the same thing?
Oh, no, and that's because you're seeing my notes.
I got you.
So yes, that, on the next couple slides, we'll look at floor area ratio. Maybe we don't make a decision yet, and we'll talk about floor area ratio and then decide maybe we do just keep lot coverage and do away with floor area ratio once I show you what we have. So the difference is, you're right, Kathy, lot coverage covers the ground of your lot. Floor area ratio takes into account the square footage on the ground plus every single story. So the true massing of the building on a lot.
Right. And so I guess as we move forward, I'm going to question whether we need both. Maybe one is better than the other, or, and I know that we have to take care of public utility easements, and we have stormwater requirements. All these things do take area away from where the building can be on the lot. And so I'm just going to leave it open as that. Once we go through the floor area ratio, I may recommend that we get rid of one or the other if they seem to be at odds or not really helping. So.
And that's definitely an option for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So next is Matt Gillette, then Bill, then Mike.
Yeah, hi guys.
I would agree with you know, the suggestions that have come out so far. I mean, I like the idea of encouraging even additional covered outdoor space, you know, porches, balconies, you know, that sort of stuff. It definitely does help with the aesthetics of the home, and having, you know, encouraging that while we are already encouraging it with that 5% allotment, you know, obviously bumping that up to 10% would encourage it even more, and larger areas of those, which would be a homeowner benefit, obviously. Audrey, the point that you had brought up about the covered parking, you know, with something up above it. Yeah, I mean, that is something obviously that would count towards lot coverage at this point, because any cantilevered or areas above those porches, patios, carports, anything like that is counted towards that lot coverage. Yeah, that might be something that is considered and looked at. Obviously, that carport type area, if it didn't have living space above, would fit into that 5% allotment right now, or possibly the 10% if we increased it to that. I like all those suggestions. I definitely would tend to kind of agree with Kathy on the FAR thing, that the lot coverage has always been a lot more straightforward as far as explaining it to buyers, getting them to understand, you know, that calculation and what is allowed and isn't allowed. As far as those requirements, FAR has always been something that has been a little bit more troublesome to get the point across why it's there, other than just the overall massing. So that was just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, Bill, Mike, Bill, and then Mike.
Yeah, this is Bill Bernardi. So first, I'd ask that you just would you clarify whether lot coverage and floor area ratio both apply in the same circumstance, because that's sort of not how I read the code. It seems to me, depending on situations, one or the other applies. But so if you could clarify that, I'd appreciate it. The other point I wanted to make was that there's growing momentum for revising and updating the city's tree preservation code. There's been a lot of clear cutting of lots, and that's been accelerating, contributing to what are called urban heat islands. And, you know, we need to be aware that ultimately, you know, what's done on a single lot is multiplied hundreds of times over and has a huge impact on the community as a whole. So we need to, you know, keep in mind that that there's a sort of a community-wide perspective here. And if we cut down all the trees, that's not going to help anybody. So one of the things that lot coverage does is it doesn't just allow a backyard for kids to play in, which is a good thing. It also allows us to preserve some trees. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. And to follow up on that, the requirements for lot coverage and floor area ratio do overlap in some cases. And I'll give you one example right now, and then you'll see the other examples once we start talking about floor area ratio. But if a single family detached dwelling unit wants to build an accessory dwelling unit, they would have to comply with lot coverage, and they would have to comply with floor area ratio of 0.6. So there are instances where you have to comply with both.
So I guess the question that comes up is, has that been a barrier or a real constraint? I mean, when the examples you show, you know, it looks like, you know, pretty large structures are able to be built. I mean, we in our HOA, we just processed you know, a design review application for a house that's only going to cover 38% of the lot, and it's a 6,200 square foot house with a 1,700 square foot garage. So,
yeah, I mean, and you'll see, and maybe we won't make a decision on lot coverage till we go through floor area ratio, because there's a lot to learn on both. But with floor area ratio, in certain cases, our maximum is 0.6. When you see the OARs and then the model code, it significantly increases from 0.6 to over 100%. So at some point, in my opinion, when it's so large, it really doesn't, it's just not needed anymore because it's not controlling anything because it's so high. But we'll see that in the next couple slides. So I think I feel more comfortable if we don't make a decision on lot coverage yet. We'll keep the discussion because I see another couple hands raised. And then I want to go through floor area ratio so we all understand what the requirements are, what the lot coverage requirement is, and what floor area ratio is. And then we can make a recommendation on how to move forward with one or both of them. Looks like, was Mike next?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, Mike.
Hi, just a simple suggestion. First, all good comments on this lot coverage. I think it would be helpful if there was one exhibit that shows by definition what qualifies as lot coverage. I heard what I thought was slightly different versions from Aubrey and Matt. So it just a picture to help us to understand what qualifies, what needs to maybe be changed a little bit as to be sympathetic to what Kathy was pointing out. That's it, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mike. And what they're talking about is really going back to the definition that we have in the code today for lot coverage, increasing the porches, patios, and decks possibly to 10%. And my notes say, look at carports that have structures above it. So for example, maybe you have a house and then you want to build an ADU with it being above a carport. Is there some exception that we could do because it's open on the first floor that wouldn't necessarily be allowed under the current definition today? The examples I showed, let's see.
But the floor area of the structure above the carport, does that count as lot coverage? Or
today it does because it is covering the ground and it's higher than 18 inches.
Yeah, so Aubrey's suggesting that needs to be cut some slack there. Okay.
Right, because it's not a solid structure on the ground. It provides a little bit more, it provides openness on the actual ground itself.
But Kathy was right. I was actually thinking of floor area ratio, not of lot coverage. So I kind of messed up there.
Well, sounds like a little exhibit that shows how it's all calculated would be helpful.
All right, was there any other hands up? Mike, I still see yours, and anybody else? And Scott.
Scott, yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a ballpark estimate of how many homes get built that are right up against the floor area ratio and or the lot coverage, just to kind of give us an idea. Like, well, is it typical for buildings to max out?
The ones I was looking at are not maxing out on lot coverage. And I don't know that I found, I mean, even this structure here is rather large. It's not close to maxing out on the lot coverage.
Yeah, because it just seems like there'd be a difference between, you know, a house that's 900 or 1,000 square feet that's maximizing their lot coverage versus something like this that, you know, a fourplex on a much larger lot maxing out. I mean, I don't know if we'd be interested in having like kind of a tiered system of smaller properties would allow for a larger lot coverage or something like that, or possibly ADUs not counting towards lot coverage since they're already restricted in size.
And then Matt, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Scott, to kind of answer your question as far as how common is it max out that lot coverage. We run into it quite a bit on, more, community driven master plan subdivision type lots in a master plan community or whatnot. We even, request an increase in lot coverage in many stances to hit desired densities because we're providing, open space requirements or amenities or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, we'll hit those max coverages pretty regularly on, lots, kind of like what you were saying, in a tiered system, but on lots 6,000 square feet or less is typically where we run into the biggest issue.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's because it's a master plan, and so they probably come up with the floor plans and the lot sizes at the same time.
Yes, that's correct. We're designing around the lot sizes that we're providing to hit the required densities because we have, again, those additional park spaces or open spaces. If you're doing an infill type lot, you don't have those additional spaces. And so typically you would, present a yard or some sort of outdoor space covered area, something for use a lot of times, which, is in lieu of those parks and open spaces, so that the coverage isn't hit quite as often, that max coverage, as it would be in a community.
I don't know if it'd be helpful if I showed a bird's eye view. So this one up on the screen is at 27%. So obviously on the lower side of our lot coverages, but I can show you a bird's eye, just bear with me. So now I have to, hold on.
Pauline, could I just speak while you still have that slide
please,
up?
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that a lot of the reason why things aren't being maxed out is parking is being provided on the surface that you can see on that slide that it just disappeared, but on your shared screen. And if we go and propose no parking minimums, that it may affect it somewhat. Just want to point that out. But I do agree with, I'm not sure if it was Scott or someone else mentioning that, we really want to try to encourage accessory dwelling units. And so whether there can be, as Audrey has recommended, even though I understand she was confusing FAR with lot coverage, I think the idea of encouraging second dwelling units either by not enforcing the FAR or being more flexible with lot coverage if it's a carport underneath or something to that effect, I think would be a good thing to do, because there's probably a lot of obstacles already to getting these accessory dwelling units. So, I would be supportive of looking in that particular case of being more flexible. So,
okay, Kathy, and we have a discussion on accessory dwelling units in just a moment too. So I think you'll be pleased with some of the proposals. So this is the lot from a bird's eye view that we were just looking at. And again, it was on the lower lot coverage requirements, but here is the, I think this was the duplex in the back. This is the single family structure in the front. And then you can see the amount of the lot that is not covered. That, if we didn't have lot coverage requirements, could be significantly covered compared to what is there today. And then it would still be significantly more lot coverage if we didn't have lot coverage at all. So I'm going to switch back, and then why don't we maybe go on to floor area ratio and just kind of table this discussion for a moment. And then once we're done with floor area ratio, then we will talk about both again. And hopefully that will help us get to at least a draft proposal that we can start working on. And just bear, okay. All right, you should be seeing my screen again. Okay, so again, these were our three options, just to keep in the back of your mind for lot coverage. Keep what we have today, increase the lot coverages, as we talked about, maybe increasing the exceptions for porches, decks, carports from 5% to 10%. or eliminate lot coverages. So now with floor area ratio, these are what the minimum compliance allows and what the model code allows. So similar to lot coverage, a city is not required with minimum compliance to apply floor area ratio standards to duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes if we don't want to. If we want to, it has to be done the same that we do or less than a single family detached dwelling. And in a moment, I'm going to show you the various floor area ratio requirements that the City of Bend currently has, and there will be some required changes. The model code is set up different than what we have today, and it would only apply to triplexes and quads. It would not apply to duplexes because duplexes have to be treated the same way as a single family detached dwelling. Bear with me because this could get confusing. So the model code would allow us to look at floor area ratio based on the minimum lot size for a detached single family dwelling in the same zone. So I tried to break it down. So the model code allows if you are a lot in a single family zone of 3,000 square feet or less, which is allowed in the medium density residential zone, that would allow you to have a floor area ratio of 1.4. Currently today, remember when we do use floor area ratio in the City of Bend, it's 0.6. So this is double, more than double. If you have a lot requirement between 3,000 and 5,000 square feet, as we do in our standard density residential district for single family homes, which is 4,000 square feet, it bumps floor area ratio to 1.1. And then if you have a lot that's between 5 and 10, which is our low density residential district, it bumps floor area ratio to 0.7. And again, this would pretty much only apply, my understanding would be triplexes and quads if we went with a model code. The next slide shows our definition. If I can get my, hold on, having a hard time getting my arrow. Okay, there we go. This is the definition in the Bend code for floor area ratio. It basically is a measurement of the deck space, which is floor space, contained within a building on every single floor. Also includes garages. There is some exceptions when we calculate floor area for staircases. If the stair is used for a, let's say for example, in a single family detached dwelling, under the staircase is a restroom and then the stairs lead up to the house, the staircase is counted twice in that case. If the staircase is, let's say for an accessory dwelling unit, the stairs lead up to the accessory dwelling unit. However, the space under the stairs is part of a garage, it is not counted twice. We just added this other amendment to floor area because floor area really is to help control the massing of a building. And in some cases, if you have a like an A-frame roof and the sides of the roof are very low, so inside the building, a architect might design that area because it's less than 5 feet, but it's still usable for like a closet. Prior to this, we would have to count that towards their floor area, and it almost penalized them because it's not contributing to the mass. It's such a low roof area that area now would not count towards your floor area. And then the floor area definition is pretty basic. You just take the building floor area and divide it by the land area. Where we regulate floor area in Bend today is pretty minimal. If you do accessory dwelling units, which an accessory dwelling unit can be with a single family detached house or with a townhouse. If either of those propose to do an ADU, then they would be subject to the 0.6 floor area ratio. If a developer wants to do a duplex or a triplex, we only apply floor area ratio of 0.6 if they're in the standard density residential district, not in the medium or high districts. And then there's this other section in the development code that applies to single family detached dwellings. This has been in the code for many, many years, and I think it stems back from the older subdivisions that were platted prior to 1998 to help back then keep the scale of the developments in line with what's already there. And so there's 3 areas that if you meet any of these, a single family detached dwelling would be subject to 0.6 floor area ratio. The first one is all new single family residential construction. So if you want to build a new house, or if you want to add on to your existing house and you're on a lot that is 6,000 square feet or less, and you're located in a subdivision platted prior to 1998, you would be subject to 0.60 floor area ratio. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes a buyer buys a lot not knowing that they have a different requirement because of the year that their lot was platted. So it does cause some issues, but there's probably some reasons to keep this. Another one is, and the planners thought they're not quite, this one's a little odd. I'd recommend getting rid of it. If you have an existing home on a lot and you want to partition that lot and that puts that home over 0.6, then you cannot do the partition. And now that we have lot sizes that can be 4,000 square feet for single family detached, you might see more subdivisions going down to 4,000, but if there's an existing home, then you can't do it if that home is over 0.6 floor area ratio. Planners don't see this happen very often because sometimes, or more often than not, if you have an existing home, you usually tend to partition the property and give that existing home a little bit bigger home site and the other lots a little bit smaller so that it is easier to meet that 0.6 FAR. And then the last one is if you are a developer, let's say Polish, and you want to come in and create a new subdivision that abuts an existing subdivision platted prior to 1998, those lots of that 1998 subdivision, if they're 6,000 square feet and you're creating new lots that abut those that are 6,000 square feet or less, those are subject to the 0.6 FAR. Hard to track, and there's an easy way around it. A developer can simply make the lot 6,001 square foot, and this goes away. So it's almost meaningless to even have it. When this comes into play, because we have to treat duplexes the same as or we can treat duplexes the same as detached single family dwelling units, we could keep this and have it also apply to duplexes. That's something to think about. It could also apply to triplexes because they can be possibly on a lot that's 6,000 square feet or less. This would not apply if we require a minimum 7,000 square foot lot to a fourplex, because this only comes into play on lots 6,000 square feet or less. So you would never have a, in the standard density residential district, for example, a quadplex on a lot smaller than 7,000 if that's what we come up with for the lot size for a quadplex. So again, kind of odd that we would treat single family duplexes and triplexes with an FAR in compliance with this, but right next door someone could build a fourplex on a 7,000 square foot lot and not have to comply with this. So this is where things get kind of tricky because, it's probably worked just fine in the code, but now that we have to treat these different types of plexes fairly similar to single family, but the lot sizes are changing, a lot of this gets in conflict with each other. To give you an idea of lots platted prior to 1998, and I bet this is small. That is probably.
And then Pauline, after you go through this, it looks like Kathy has a hand up.
Okay. Well, let me, I'm going to do the 2 maps first just to give a description of these 1998 lots so people have a better idea. So the areas in yellow and red are lots platted prior to 1998. The ones that are in red are the ones that would be affected by this section because they are under 6,000 square feet. So you can see down in this area off Brookswood, definitely in the older neighborhoods, and then scattered throughout the city, there are lots platted prior to 1998. It gets a little bit more complicated because a lot of those have since been replatted, And when they replat, then they're no longer lots from 1998, and then this wouldn't apply. So you take out all these hatched areas in the red, and it's hard to see, and I can send these maps out if someone's interested in them. Those areas would no longer be considered the 1998 lots because they've since been replatted. Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I think we should just get rid of FAR. It seems like it's so ridiculously complicated and it's almost archaic, and it also is creating yet another hurdle for accessory dwelling units. It doesn't look to me like it really is doing much for us as long as we have a good lot coverage requirement. And if there's concerns about maybe the third story being overwhelming, we could look at that as something else. But just seems like what you've just gone through is ridiculously complicated, and I'd hate to be staff trying to review for this and enforce it. It just seems to me we should just get rid of it and look at lot coverage in a more clear and concise way. That's my suggestion.
Not a bad suggestion. I will go through just to give you some visuals. And this is, and I think, hold on, I'm trying to get my notes. Nope. This is a recently constructed triplex right outside the Bend Central District on 4th Street that has a lot coverage at 60% and a floor area ratio of 0.5. So this is in compliance with both lot coverage and floor area ratio. A triplex, technically, even in this district, didn't even have to comply with floor area ratio, but just to show you what a 0.6 gets you, this would comply if it was a triplex in the standard density residential district. This next one is two different duplex developments. The one on the left is a duplex that was part of a newer subdivision on a larger lot. Floor area ratio of 0.33. It's 2 single-story units. And then the duplex on the corner here in the older downtown is a floor area ratio of 0.56. So under the 0.6. This is a single-family detached dwelling unit on Galveston, and it has an accessory dwelling unit, so that floor area ratio kicked in, and it just made it a floor area ratio of 0.58. So it's pretty close to the 0.6. This one was developed prior to having a floor area ratio. It clearly met the lot coverage because it's at 35%, but it would, if it came in today, not be allowed because it exceeds the 0.6 floor area ratio since it's at 0.63. So I see a couple hands. This is the last slide, and then we'll open it up for discussion. The couple options to consider, and keep in mind we still want to think about lot coverage, is the first one, we keep the current floor area ratios that apply to single family detached dwellings of 0.6. Again, that would only apply to duplexes and triplexes. If we didn't have that, we could go with a model code recommendation for triplexes and quads only, and it would be based on the lot sizes. And these are, in my opinion, pretty high FARs, so it gets to a point where I don't even know if they're truly necessary. And then the other option is to just delete floor area ratio and use lot coverages. And it looks like, were you keeping track, Linda? I see Karna's hand. Karna, why don't you go?
So my question on some of the examples that you were showing, they were below the FARs, but would they have done it differently if they weren't subject to FAR? I guess is my question.
Well, this isn't a good example. Let me look at. I mean, this one, for example, I mean, it's definitely complying with lot coverage. Could they have maybe proposed a bigger accessory dwelling unit? Maybe, but then they also have to comply with the size limits of the ADU. So a lot of different things come into play in addition to just lot coverage and floor area ratio, we have size restrictions on ADUs. So it's hard to say on this one, or even this, you know, they went as big as they wanted here because it was before FAR even came into play. So I don't think they would have gone any bigger, except maybe they would have wanted a bigger ADU. So I think too many things come into play that these aren't the only things that are restricting them for how big that they can be. Because today, you know, there's parking requirements too.
Right. So on that one that's on 4th Street, which I think is an RH.
Yes.
But they have done a 2-story.
They could have, because they're not subject to floor area ratio. Triplexes are only subject to floor area ratio if they are in the standard density residential zone.
Okay, thanks.
Good question.
And then Scott is next.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out and make sure everyone understands, for the floor area ratio, double height spaces aren't counted. So if, you know, you could take that example right there, and if that whole if the whole building was double height space, it would be the exact same FAR.
Good clarification, Scott. So this might be a good example of, let's say you walk in the front door and these 2 windows, the front door ceiling goes all the way up to the top of this roof line, and these 2 windows provide a nice high ceiling and light. That is not double FAR, that is single FAR, because we only count the deck space of the first floor. Any other hands?
Don't you mean you count the floor area on both floors? You just
Only
said
if
the
it's
first-
deck space.
Right.
Right, but if it's a 2-story vaulted ceiling from the first floor, you're only counting the first floor.
Right, that has to have a floor under it to count
Yes.
it.
Yep. But that, you know, that's a really good point that Scott brought up, because if FARs truly control the massing of a structure, we're not capturing everything the way we've defined it. It does allow a larger massing if it's a 2-story ceiling, if I'm saying that correctly. And I see Bill's hand.
Yeah, once again, you know, the examples that you're showing make it look like, you know, people can build perfectly livable dwellings under the current rules. And I just want to restate something I said last time, which is that I think we should be using the current code as a touchstone and try to accommodate the new rules under HB 2001 within the minimum standards, using the current code as much as possible as a reference, and only making changes where it's necessary to, you know, comply with the new rules. I just think it's overreaching to try to sort of to redo everything here, to use this as an opening to, you know, to refashion the Bend Development Code in order to accommodate a couple of housing types. You know, at the very least, if these big changes are going to be made, we ought to back up and apply them to single-family homes as well. And anyhow, that's my point of view. I think if it's not broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. And we're seeing that it's possible for, you know, our goal here should not be to build the largest, most expensive possible structures. The whole idea of HB 2001 was to provide middle housing. That means housing for people in the middle of the income brackets. And that isn't necessarily the biggest housing. So I'm not seeing where there's a huge problem here that needs to be fixed.
Well, and the one thing, is a good point, Bill, is I put back up on the screen what we are allowed to do, unless we did the alternative siting and design recommendation, is if we went with just the minimum compliance in the OARs, we would be looking at only applying in certain areas of the code, FAR, to duplexes, triplexes, and quads, if they're on those lots. Well, quads wouldn't even come into play, right? Because back to here, this section only applies to lots 6,000 square feet or smaller. So it's hard. This is, I don't know the saying, of trying to fit a, what is that, square in a peg or something. This applies to single family, so we can clearly keep using it and apply it to duplexes and triplexes. But right next door, if there's a 7,000 square foot lot, it couldn't apply because that fourplex is on a 7,000 square foot lot. So this number 1 wouldn't have any effect in number 3. And then the other areas would be an accessory dwelling unit at 0.6 if it's with a townhome or a single family detached dwelling unit. And then the duplexes in the RS would have to go away on the second bullet because we don't regulate single family dwelling units that way, and we have to regulate duplex same as single family. So then this would only apply. This would have to go away.
That's fine. I mean, I'm a big fan of simplicity and consistency. It's like, you know, let's make it fair.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. I thought you were hoping we could keep some of the floor area ratio that's in the code today. And what I'm trying to say is a lot of it isn't in compliance with the minimum compliance or model code. So we do have to make some changes, and it probably will get simpler.
And I'm saying that's fine. We should make changes where it's necessary in order to comply with the minimum standards in the new rules. But I don't think we should be overreaching and trying to, you know, imagine problems that don't even really seem to be problems.
And we now have Kathy, then Scott, then Audrey ready to go.
Great.
Yes, I guess what I wanted to assure Bill is that I'm looking to simplify, and there are some things that do appear to be broken to me that we do need to fix. And so by eliminating the whole application of FARs, just get rid of it. It simplifies things. And if we need to make adjustments based on the lot coverage, I think it'll make it a lot easier for, in an infill situation, for an owner to understand what they need to do, and for larger developments for the architect and builder to understand very clearly what they need to do. And if we're concerned about massing, maybe deal with it like on a third floor setback or something to that effect. But just, I just think this whole FAR thing is making it much more confusing. And I would agree with you, Pauline, what you're allowed under the new model code is so large that it's almost worthless. So I just think we should eliminate FAR and go back to lot coverage and make adjustments as we feel are necessary, so it is more simple and it is easy, and we have fixed what's broken.
Next is Scott.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that I think the FAR is it's an odd way of calculating things that can be dealt with much simpler with lot coverage and building heights, or some sort of a kind of a slope building height or something from the property lines. I think it would be interesting to look at lot coverage for different sized lots, because what I would hate to see is to eliminate some restrictions, and then it just allows for larger McMansions. You know, a lot of middle housing isn't just apartments and duplexes and things like that. Sometimes it's just smaller single family homes, and if maybe lot coverage was a higher lot coverage was allowed for smaller homes, that'd be something that would be beneficial. Yeah, anyways, I was just kind of wanted to put the feelers out there for maybe a tiered lot coverage percentage for different size lots.
So were you saying if you have a smaller lot, they might have a higher lot coverage?
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean that kind of satisfies everyone's concern with massing and you know when you look at examples of maybe this is what we don't want, a lot of those are basically large, huge buildings on massive lots that might be maxing out lot coverages and having 4,000 square foot house or something like that. But yeah, I mean if you're looking at kind of a section that might have some of these lots that you can divide up and have smaller, almost ADU size houses on a single family detached, I think that satisfies kind of everyone's concerns. And yeah, as far as the 1998 lot restriction thing, it'd be nice if that was gotten rid of.
So we next have Audrey, Matt, and then Kathy.
Yes, I just wanted to toss in that this might be one of those things that you might get some more McMansions off of allowing more coverage or more FAR, but the missing middle that it addresses is that you can then stuff 2 or 3 residences on a smaller lot if done nicely. So it does help address that issue. So I don't see that so much as overreach. And another way to maybe control that, depending on whether you want to put the more complexity to it, is if it was tied to the number of residences, so that if you are getting more density, that you are allowed a little more coverage. Maybe that's, but then you need more open space. I don't know that helps. All right, that was it.
Thank you, Audrey.
Next is Matt.
Yeah, Audrey, I'm glad you spoke on that first, because that's similar to what I was going to say in counter to kind of Scott's suggestion there, is that you're already controlling the massing based off the size of lot. I mean, if you're a smaller lot, you're automatically going to have a smaller unit. But the option, to counter that, to hit that middle missing piece, would be to offer a higher coverage based on the number of units rather than the size of the building as a whole, because I think you'd almost get more McMansions on smaller lots if the single family option were allowed with that higher percentage.
And then Kathy.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to the issue of trees. I'm sorry, I meant to mention it earlier, because I also feel we shouldn't be clear cutting all the trees off of our lots, and we should be trying to come up with some incentives for people to keep the trees beyond a new tree ordinance. And so I was just going to throw that out there, that maybe, particularly as we get into the smaller lots, that if existing mature trees are on the lot, if it's saved, that maybe they could have a greater coverage elsewhere, or figure out some way to create an incentive to save some of the trees rather than just wiping them all out because we're concerned about lot coverage or their setbacks or so forth. So I don't have a clear suggestion on that. I just wanted to say I recognize it's an issue, and if there was a way that we could incentivize people to keep mature trees when possible on a side or a rear setback, or that it would be a good thing that we should do.
I will look into that, Kathy. Good suggestion.
Looks like no more hands at this point.
Okay. All right. So I think really the next step from what I've been hearing is, although I don't know that we heard from everybody. Lisa, are you still on the call, or was she here? She's here.
Yep, I'm here. I'm listening. I think while Bill has presented some great ideas in terms of if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, I also am in favor of simplifying it. It's a tough thing to understand. So simplify away.
Thank you, Lisa. And anybody else? I just want to make sure I'm hearing from everybody. Okay, so I'm not hearing as much support for floor area ratio. This is just my capture of the discussion. One, because of the different ways we regulate floor area ratio that are not 100% consistent with minimum compliance standards and definitely too low to comply with the model code standards. So we would have to make changes to our floor area ratio section to be in compliance. And it doesn't simplify things because a fourplex, for example, might be treated different than a triplex, depending on what route we went. So one proposal would be to eliminate the floor area ratio and focus on lot coverage. The suggestions that I heard on lot coverage is to consider higher exemptions, maybe go up to 10% for the porches, decks, carports, those stoops type uses, and open stairwells. And then I could look at lot coverages. I heard a couple people talk on it, not everybody. Lot coverage requirements based on the size of, no, not based on the size, but based on the number of units. So a single family detached home might have a smaller lot coverage requirement than, let's say, a duplex, triplex, and fourplex. If I'm going down the right path, can you please raise your hand?
Can you have different lot coverages for a single family detached versus a duplex or triplex with the HB 2001?
As long as they're not more restrictive, they can be more flexible. So if let's say a single family for simplicity is at 30%, but for a duplex, triplex, and fourplex, we say 50%, it's okay because it's not more restrictive. Good question, Scott.
Hey, Pauline, I have a potential suggestion now that we just have a bunch of raised hands. There were 5 folks who raised, but what I'm not sure about is how many other folks are participating or kind of ready to vote either way. So what I'm wondering is if it makes sense for everybody to take the hands down, and then if folks are not happy about the direction, raise it, and that'll give me a good sense of who's out there.
Okay, good, because not everybody's part of the committee. So the only people that should be voting are on the committee too. Okay,
so we had 5 for the yes, we're going in the right direction. So anyone who is not excited about this direction, how about if you put in, and if folks are, I know a couple chats have come through, and Lisa just mentioned maybe not sure yet, so that's okay. I think uncertainty is all right. We're just trying to get a sense of whether kind of the majority is in support. So if you're not happy with the current direction, raise your hand. I see 1 hand right now. And Bill, did you? I think I saw your hand up in the last vote also. So did you have a question? I'm wondering if that's a question also.
No, I find it hard to vote on these multi-part things because I agree with some of what Pauline suggested, but I disagree with the notion of, allowing larger duplexes and triplexes in infill situations where they're going to overwhelm. I mean, it's the same thing as a McMansion situation. Nobody wants that. We ought to be looking for some kind of compatibility. And so, I'd rather just say, eliminate FAR, but I don't see a point to allowing more lot coverage, in situations where, say a triplex is, between 2 single-family homes, and the single-family homes are restricted, but the triplex isn't. It doesn't make any sense to me. I would say I want to second Kathy's suggestion about creating incentives for people to retain trees. I like the idea of incentives. I think that's something that ought to be looked at.
And thank you, Bill. One option, and sorry to throw another one out there, is to do away with floor area ratio still, look at lot coverage, but treat units the same. Add some more flexibility in there that we've discussed, increasing that 5% to 10%, and then throwing in incentives for tree preservation. So if you are a single family or a duplex or a triplex and you preserve a tree, of course, it would probably be, what we define as a significant tree, then you would get a bonus lot coverage. And this is just the beginning discussion. I'm going to draft something. We're going to talk about it again. I just need a starting point. So am I getting closer? I see Scott has a hand up.
Yeah, I was just wanted to comment on the tree preservation thing. I'm just wondering how that would work once you get a building permit and you move in. What's to stop someone from just cutting the tree down later?
And that's the homework I would have to do. And we're not going to turn this discussion, I can guarantee you, into the tree preservation code by any means. It's just looking at a possible incentive.
Okay, and then Mike is next.
Mike, your hand's up. Did you have something to share with us?
I think you might be muted. Let me unmute you. Oh no, I can't unmute you.
There we go. Sorry, it took me a while to
Okay.
get the cursor.
That's okay.
Sorry. In general, I think it is confusing. We almost have too many variables, and there is an overlap between what FAR does versus coverage, building height, setbacks. It is more complicated than it really needs to be. So I would say in general, it's worth looking at, not focusing on FAR. Although I have a side note, the 13-page analysis that the consultants did for the state, they focused on the FAR a little bit because they knew they were getting floor area, and floor area generated bedrooms, which generates rent. So from a cost feasibility, I know that their report talked about FAR and the importance, but I think it's worth letting Pauline take a shot at what happens if we don't use FAR. But let's don't approve the option until we see it.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments? Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just would agree with everything that's been said, Pauline, and it's helpful to know that what you're talking about is you're going to do a little research, you're going to come back to us with another version that we can then vote on so that everybody feels comfortable and that they're not voting for something they don't mean to be voting for. So, but I think the direction that you're going in is correct, at least in my mind. That's what I would support.
So I'm going to focus on lot coverage improvements. I'm not going to focus so much on FAR as if that's going away, and I will bring back a draft at a later date with some proposals to consider for lot coverage amendments. And I will definitely look into incentives for tree preservation on these residential lots. But I'm just going to look into that. This is not turning into a tree preservation code amendment at all. Matt?
Yeah, as far as the different proposals or increases with the lot coverage, I just wanted to kind of throw out there a starting point, possibly if we were looking at adding lot coverage, if we're doing additional units, and just say maybe as a starting point, we investigate or look at an additional 5% per additional unit. ADU would apply to that as well.
I'm just trying to pull up the current lot coverage so we have those in front of us again. There we go. Yeah, we can look at additional units. There's still need for obviously single family detached dwelling units as well. So I will look at improving this section that's in front of you for lot coverages and see what I can propose for additional units as another option. Either we're just going to keep it real simple and have it just be consistent for the same for every type of unit, And then the other option would be incentives for additional units. And then Mike, I think you're trying to say something maybe? Okay, all right. Thank you so much for bearing with me on that discussion. So we got another fun one to start, which is accessory dwelling units. So the minimum compliance standards are a little open-ended on how you calculate, you know, a duplex, triplex, and quad, where it gives you the opportunity to also allow a accessory dwelling unit with these units. So basically, for example, you can have a duplex, which is 2 units, and possibly have an ADU. Currently, accessory dwelling units in the Bend Development Code are only allowed with single-family detached dwelling units and townhomes. This would then change to allow an ADU with a plex development, which seems a little odd in my opinion, because a duplex with an ADU is in all sense a triplex. A triplex with an ADU is a fourplex. I put it out on my planning listserv today to see what other communities do. And most of them still just treat an accessory dwelling unit as an accessory to a single family detached or townhome development and not allow them with duplex, triplex, and quad developments. So I'd be interested in hearing feedback on this. And one option too, I do want to consider because it's come up in past code updates and discussions. I think Audrey even brought it up. In the Bend Development Code, we do have cottage developments, cottage housing developments, and we're going to be talking about cluster developments as part of this code update. Those are single family detached dwelling units. They're just in a cottage cluster development. Those might be somewhere where we could look at adding accessory dwelling units because they're still accessory to a single family detached dwelling unit. Just something to think about. But for today, I just want to focus on whether or not we want to allow an ADU to be accessory to a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. I see Kathy's hand.
Yes, thank you. I guess it would have to be if it's very clear that a duplex, a triplex, or a quad could be detached, or were we only thinking about duplexes as being detached? Because I think I could see an example where there's an existing home that's rather large that someone subdivides and makes it into a duplex and then also wants to have an accessory dwelling unit, and you wouldn't necessarily call that a triplex. So, and also when you have an ADU, it's limited to a specific size. So of course it makes sense for someone to say, oh no, this is a triplex. But a lot of people think of triplexes and quads as being attached. So, and they think of ADUs as more likely detached, even though I know they can be attached. So I'm not making a lot of sense here, but I guess you and I have talked about the fact that a duplex could be 2 detached units on the same lot, correct?
Correct. And today you can do a detached triplex, so you can have 3 detached units. Mm-hmm. And then the proposal for a quadplex would be the same thing if they don't have to be attached. And that's right. In compliance with the OARs and model code.
Okay, so in that case, it doesn't really make sense to have an ADU with a duplex because you have a little more flexibility on the size of each of the units if you're allowed to have them be detached. Mm-hmm. I think it's you wind up with a 5-plex basically if you have right. 4 units and so. To me, as long as it's very clear that these multiple units can be detached, it's really not necessary to allow the ADU in my thoughts.
I agree, Kathy. Any other comments on this? I see.
Yep. Yeah, and Mike.
Great. Comment?
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you guys. I'm doing condominium projects right now that are like this. They're duplexes with ADUs, I mean, detached duplexes with ADUs on either side, and we're condoing them all. Now, the ADU is really small. It's, you know, a student type housing, 400 square feet type thing. And it allows the maybe retired or other new couple to rent out and earn income on the ADU, and allows them to pay their mortgage, which we're seeing more and more of because they can't necessarily afford to live in Bend, but if they have something that they can rent out, it helps pay their mortgage. Just my 2 cents.
So Karna, help me understand. So you have one lot and they build a duplex on it, and then each unit gets another unit for a total of 4, and then you make 4 condos.
Yeah, and then you make 4 condos. I'm doing one right now.
So my proposal with this was just to allow 1 ADU per plex development, not one, just for clarity, not 1 ADU per unit.
Now mine is not, the one project I'm working on is not in Bend, it's in Portland, but I don't see why you wouldn't allow, now we can deal with, you know, maybe it can only be a certain size with 1 for each duplex or 1 for each triplex. But, you know, when we're talking about people who can't afford to live there or live in a particular jurisdiction and they need the rental income, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow it if that was a single family home on its own lot. So that's my 2 cents.
Karna, wouldn't it just be a 4-plex then?
No, not necessarily, because the ADU may be on the same, I mean, no, it's not, it would not be called a 4-plex. Because a 4-plex would allow them to all be the same size.
But if you could allow, if you limit yourself by calling it an ADU, is I guess what I'm saying, Karna, is you have more flexibility if you can call it a duplex that's detached or a 4-plex. You know, it's more liberal for you than if you were to do what you're proposing.
Yeah, but if you do a 4-plex, my understanding is you would be, well, I just don't, if you can do 4-plex, there's no reason why you can't do it, an ADU with each of them then. I'll be done.
ADU does have some benefits to it in terms of like parking and if you were going to put it in later and upgrading the sidewalk, things like that. There are some benefits for calling it, for having a duplex and adding an ADU as opposed to turning it into a triplex.
So just to clarify a couple things. With this process, we'll have to treat and process, and we haven't talked about this much and still diving into the details, but we have to process a duplex the same as a single family detached dwelling, and a triplex and a 4-plex as well. So today, a triplex and a 4-plex are processed as a type 2, and sidewalks do get kicked in. That's not going to be allowed. They will have to be processed as a type 1. All those types of developments, single family detached, a duplex, triplex, 4-plex, are only required to put in sidewalks if they're sidewalks within 600 feet. Only use that's not required to put in sidewalks today is an accessory dwelling unit. But as soon as that's defined as a duplex with an accessory dwelling unit, that duplex itself will trigger sidewalks if there's sidewalks within 600 feet. So that is the sidewalk discussion in the process. The second thing is for the committee to understand, Karna, and help me understand. So if you have a duplex and what's being proposed is that, or actually in the code today, you can do a duplex on a 4,000 square foot lot. If you're allowed to put 2 more units, then you really have a 4-plex on a 4,000 square foot lot versus doing a quad on a 7,000 square foot lot.
Well, yes, I guess the project I'm doing is on a bigger lot. But if you're putting it like over top of a garage on that 4,000 square foot lot, I mean, I guess you're dealing with lot coverage at that point, whether you can add the ADU or not.
Well, lot coverage is only what's on the ground. If it's on top, then probably not talking about lot coverage. I don't want this to get too confusing. One, we have to administer this in the code. So for planners, there would be process adding an ADU. There's going to be the planning text would have to process it. SDCs come into play. It does get a little confusing. If we want to keep things simple, then we just allow ADUs as accessory to single family and townhomes like we do today. We're already adding a lot of flexibility into the code for additional units on lots for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes.
But what if you have a duplex on a 10,000 square foot lot? Are we saying that we can't have an ADU for each side of the duplex?
Well, they could just do a fourplex.
So they'd have to remodel it into a fourplex.
Well, it's 4 units. Either way you look at it, it's a duplex and 2 ADUs is 4 units, and a fourplex is 4 units.
Okay. I see you're trying to talk me out of it.
Or I'm trying to better understand it.
Yeah.
And okay, so Lynn, who was next?
Mike, Scott, then Kathy. Oh, and then Karna again.
No, I just took my hand down.
I think I agree with Kathy, unless you can show us some financial reason or how it operates, an improvement by calling it an ADU. Adding ADU just turns a duplex to a triplex or a triplex to a quad. I don't see there's going to be a significant advantage to call it an ADU. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mike. And who is next?
Scott.
That's me.
And then
Okay.
Kathy and then Matt.
Hi, Scott. Go ahead.
I just wanted a little clarification on this. Are we talking about adding an ADU to a property that could have a single family, a duplex, a triplex, or a quad? Or are we talking about adding an ADU for each unit?
So the proposal is today you can already have an ADU at the single family detached or townhome. The proposal was if you had let's say a duplex, you can add 1 ADU. If you have a triplex, you can add 1 ADU, not an ADU per number of units on the lot.
Yeah, okay. I think that's fine. I think allowing an ADU for each unit is can get out of hand.
And we're already providing a lot of flexibility with these amendments as required by House Bill 2001. And this is something, let's say we just keep status quo with ADUs right now, although I do have one more question and we do need to finish this up in 22 minutes. This is not, well, as long as I'm here, we're going to keep doing code updates. So if we get everything done in a package and in a year from now, we're starting to think, well, maybe it would be nice to allow an ADU with a duplex. We can always come back and talk about this at a later date, but with such significant changes that we're going to be making with this package of amendments, it might be good to start off with these amendments required by House Bill 2001, and then at a later date, we can revisit this discussion. Just a thought. Was it Matt that was next?
Kathy, then Matt.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you, Pauline, and that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to ask a question. Did we get rid of density? I mean, a lot of ADUs don't count against density. And so that would be the only other question I would have is there a benefit in calling it an ADU if we're bumping up against certain densities?
ADUs only count towards minimum densities, so it helps like 2 units get on a lot, so they meet minimum, but they don't count towards maximum, similar to how we're going to treat duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes.
So if there's no real benefit in calling it an ADU, it sounded to me like from all the discussion so far that it doesn't necessarily help us to call it an ADU, but when it's an ADU, you are limited in size. And you may not need a sidewalk, but if you're adding it to a duplex or a triplex, they already have to have a sidewalk.
If there's within 600 feet, yes. The benefit for somebody today, if you have a single family detached dwelling and you want to add an ADU, which is basically 2 units on a lot, there is a reduction in SDC fees. Instead of calling it a duplex, there are reduced fees for an ADU. But that's only if you're going to be on a lot with a single family detached dwelling unit or a townhome.
Okay, so it doesn't kick in if you're proposing, well, if you have a triplex and you wanted to add an ADU, would the ADU also have less
That's where it gets
SDC?
complicated. That's where it gets complicated, and we're not changing SDCs with this. That's a totally different department. So obviously I'm preferring just keep it simple.
Yeah.
And maybe we discuss it at a later date. But it's up to the advisory committee for sure, not up to me.
You know, I would support you on that. I just wanted to make sure I covered all the bases and what the benefit of calling it an ADU versus not. That's all.
Thank you, Kathy. And then Matt, and then it looks like Ethan.
Yeah, I kind of had the same question, you know, just again, brainstorming and playing devil's advocate to see if there was some additional benefits to what Karna was talking about. I mean, is there, as far as unit size for that additional unit, obviously there's a cap for ADUs. Is there also a minimum though for standard dwelling units to where there would be a benefit to calling it an ADU where you couldn't call it a dwelling unit?
I don't think so, because everything has to comply with minimum standards. ADUs or any of the duplex, triplex, they have to meet minimum. It's the maximums that are going away.
Okay.
And I'll keep thinking, I mean, if I can come up with a good reason to do this, and maybe Ethan's going to correct me, maybe I'm not even going down the right path with this. I'm kind of curious what he has to add. But, you know, I'll keep thinking about this, but so far I'm just not seeing a real benefit to adding this complexity to our code amendments. Ethan?
Yeah. Hi, Pauline, and hey, everyone. I just wanted to jump in based on, I think the last person, I'm sorry, I don't remember their name, who asked if an ADU could be added to an existing triplex, quadplex, or duplex for that matter. I just wanted to clarify something in House Bill 2001 itself that defines an accessory dwelling unit as an interior attached or detached residential structure that is used in conjunction with or that is accessory to a single family dwelling. So the standards that are that have been defined as reasonable siting and design standards in conjunction with an accessory dwelling unit that House Bill 2001 kind of removed, and those are being the owner occupancy requirement and the off-street parking requirement. Those don't typically, at least the way that I read it, wouldn't be meeting that definition of accessory dwelling unit because it is not used in connection with or that is accessory to a single family dwelling. So I just wanted to raise that clarification point, and I don't know if that helps or makes it more confusing, but.
So I think I only brought it up, Ethan, and maybe we could chat offline about this, just make sure I'm not missing anything. It's in the minimum compliance standards 205 through 230, where it talks about the numerical standards. And I don't know if you guys can see my notes. I think you can, where it says duplexes, large cities may allow more than 2 dwelling units on a lot, including any ADUs. And then for tris and quads, it says large cities may allow more than 4 dwelling units on a lot, including any ADUs. So that's where I was thinking that it was open-ended. I definitely wanted to bring the question to this group because it's in there, the way I read it anyways, that it's an option. But I think what I'm hearing from this committee so far is that we're just going to go with them being an accessory as defined in our urban development code to a single family dwelling unit or a townhome.
Ethan, are you wrapped up? If so, I'll take your hand down, and then we have Bill and Scott.
And we have one more question that I do need to get through in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm all done. Thanks.
Thank you, Ethan.
Bill?
Yeah, so I'm in favor of leaving things the way they are, keeping ADUs as an accessory to a single family home or a townhome. It just seems much clearer for all the reasons people have said. The only difference I can see is if there were minimum parking requirements, for duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And I'd like to think that question isn't completely put to bed for all of these. Then I would favor allowing one ADU per lot. Not one ADU per unit, but one per lot, as is now done for single-family homes. That would be consistent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We'll keep that in mind depending on how the parking goes as we move further through our amendments. And that looks like Scott.
Yeah.
Did we lose you?
Duplex with an ADU, but I like the way it kind of creates a mechanism for future code developments of encouraging that smaller ADU development, where maybe whether it's lot coverage, whether it's parking, whether it's something that you can attach it to ADU developments, which are limited in size, to differentiate from just adding another plex to it. So that's it.
And one thing for the group to know, as Ethan mentioned, for House Bill 2001, and we are already in compliance, there's no parking requirement for ADUs, which is required by the House bill. So that's already done. So I think from what I'm hearing, we're going to leave ADUs as is. Down the road, maybe once we get all these amendments in place and we see how things are going, maybe there'll be another opportunity for us to revisit ADUs. I have to say, with all the amendments we've been doing in the past couple of years, this last year, 2020, we exceeded 100 ADUs, which is the highest we've ever been. And every year it seems to go higher and higher because we keep changing the code to make it more flexible to encourage the development of ADUs. Given that, the proposal in number 2 on your screen is one more area where I think we could add to the flexibility of accessory dwelling units. And this is pretty much because we did an amendment in compliance with House Bill 2001 for duplexes, which requires a duplex to be allowed on the same size lot as a single family. So, for example, in the standard density residential, what was required for a duplex was 6,000 square feet. And we had to reduce that to 4,000 square feet to be in compliance with House Bill 2001. So now you can do a duplex or you can do a single family detached dwelling unit on a 4,000 square foot lot. Well, we've been getting some inquiries from the public and from the planners on the requirements for ADUs that we have in the code today, which really just, in my opinion, don't make as much sense as they used to because of these lot size of 4,000. The code today says if you have a lot up to 6,000 square feet, the maximum size of your accessory dwelling unit is 600 square feet. If your lot is over 600 square feet, then the maximum size of your accessory dwelling unit can be 800 square feet. That used to make sense with the 6,000 square foot threshold when duplexes were allowed on 6,000 square foot lots. It doesn't really make sense anymore because duplexes are now on 4,000 square foot lots. So why wouldn't we allow either a house with an ADU, the ADU being up to 800 square feet regardless of the lot size, now since you can allow a duplex on that same size lot and there's no size restrictions. So thoughts on that? And I don't even know if I explained that properly. We have about 11 minutes, but I do want to get some direction on this. Staff is in support of capping the ADU size now at 8,000 regardless of lot size. So was Bill's hand up first? I think it might have been. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's an inconsistency that ought to be eliminated.
Great, thank you, Bill. Kathy?
Yes, I would agree as well. And you can fit a 2-bedroom unit in 800 square feet, whereas in the 600 square foot, you're really only going to have 1 bedroom typically. And so you can accommodate more people per ADU if we were to do this, which I think is the goals that we're trying to reach. So I would be supportive.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other hands? Everybody getting tired? Okay, so my next step then will be to set up another meeting, and we're going to aim for 2 weeks from today. And that meeting, I would like to get through triplexes and fourplexes. So we'll shift back over to the Excel chart for that meeting. I will try in the meantime also to draft up some language regarding lot coverage. I'll see what I can come up with between now and then and get through those. But I would love to get through the next meeting, triplexes and fourplexes. And then the meeting after that, I would really like to get through townhouses, which I don't think will take very long. It's pretty straightforward. And then dive into the cottage clusters, because that's a new type of development similar to what we have today for cottage developments. But that might take a meeting. So I'd love to get through that Excel chart so I can really start preparing a draft so that we can set up another meeting and start going through the draft. So you'll see an email from me for another Teams meeting. So we're at the 6th today. It'll probably be the week of the 18th. And I might aim for just doing the 20th again between 1 and 3, but you'll see a meeting invite and it will be to go over triplexes and fourplexes for sure, since we didn't get through those today. Any other comments?
Good work, Pauline.
No, thanks, Kathy. All right, wow, we actually, okay, we're gonna finish up 8 minutes early. So just making sure there's no other comments. And if there isn't, then we'll talk in 2 weeks. Okay.
Thanks, Pauline.
Thanks, Pauline.
Thank you, everybody. Long meeting.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.